do you agree that this is the part of the India's historical tradition to have uniformity in the social laws, in the cultural laws, in the religious laws? And is it desirable?
So I don't think uniformity as far as the personal realm or the cultural realm or even the religious realm for that matter is the norm in Bharat. That has not been the case. This is largely a consequence of a nation-state based approach where Eurocentrism effectively tells you that if you happen to be a single nation, then there must be homogeneity at least with respect to a certain set of laws, and personal laws being a part of it. It makes sense to have that, assuming that the population is homogeneous, but if that's not the case, I'm not sure it's a welcome move. At the very least, I'd like to know the basis of it. My position has been that if the Uniform Civil Code, as and when a draft is released, is based on Bharatiya ethos, I would certainly support it. But if it requires any further concessions from the majority community, I may not be able to support it. In principle, I don't know what I'm going to support at this point because I have not seen a document yet. And as a lawyer, I've said this before, that I don't think it is in common sense to support a document which you're yet to see. You can't sign on a blank check or a blank piece of paper. So as long as there is no document on the basis of which a discussion can happen on an intelligent basis, I don't think it's possible to take a position. So I remain consideredly agnostic at this point. If at all I'm pushed to taking a position, the position will be, if it is based on Bharatiya Sanskriti, then I might consider and I might get on board. That's my position.
Yeah. Sai, lots of panelists have talked about the secularism and the basic structure of the constitution. Right. Well, India, I think, has 6 classical languages. And there is no word for secularism in any of the India's classical language because concept itself was absent throughout the civilizational history of India. But still, India was the most diverse, most tolerant, most plural society without the concept of secularism. So how do you respond to this idea that we have to have a uniform civil code because of secularism? Is there any other rationale behind it? Or do you really want to go back to the old system where different caste and communities can follow their own tradition like the opponents of the UCCC are talking about?
So let me start first of all by wholeheartedly endorsing the opening remarks of my dear friend Anand Ranganathan in letter and spirit. Second, I think it's important to understand that we are beating around the actual issue here under the pretext of uniformity. Which community in this country has a problem with equal treatment is the specific question that you must ask. What are the issues and what are the areas? 1, on the question of polygamous marriages or monogamous marriages. 2, on the question of succession. 3, on the question of maintenance and any other issue such as child marriage or forced circumcision, so to speak. Okay, these are the issues. If these are the issues, which is the group or the community under question which has a problem with this? So when people start using my opening remarks as a way of getting out of this debate, I might as well bring the issue back to the center of the table and say, sorry, the issue in question is Muslim exceptionalism. I don't wish to beat around the bush. And if that is the issue, it makes very little sense for certain panelists to hide behind other communities in my position or Vishnu's position to say, no, look at them, since they have not committed, why should we commit? And the argument that is being presented is, well, Hindus are not open to uniformity. Let's see if you're okay with interference with your personal laws. Our personal laws have already been interfered with since 1955. We were never consulted with this. The majority community was never asked any kind of questions. Today, the Supreme Court says that the new law, apparently, according to the Supreme Court, is before you pass a legislation, you're supposed to have a discussion with the community. That too with respect to farmers and farm laws, where we afforded this kind of an opportunity. If that is not the case, you're actually speaking with a victim majority here, which is already suffering the consequences of Nehru's forcible introduction of the Hindu code in the 1950s. So, I don't think anybody has the moral authority to pontificate to Hindus with respect to state intervention. If there is a community in this country that has been constantly interfered with by the state, regardless of who's in power, it is the Hindu community. That is a fact. Second, look, here's the important issue. You want to address these issues. I think whichever government is interested in discussing Uniform Civil Code must actually drop the discussion on the Uniform Civil Code and must grow a spine to discuss the issue of Muslim exceptionalism as opposed to sending chadars to Ajmer. Okay? That is something for the government to do. 3, the next question will be, well, is this consistent with India's commitment to secularism? Sorry, India is equally committed to the question of human rights, and India is equally committed to the question of gender justice and social justice. It is possible for this country to take a position against polygamous marriages, child marriages, forced circumcision, and even with respect to succession, without having to resort to uniform civil code. Because the moment you start talking about uniform civil code, their argument is going to be, it's unenforceable, it needs to be done, this needs to be done, that needs to be done. Sorry, I don't need to go the path of uniform civil code to enforce any of these aspects. The state has the power to interfere with any kind of social injustice. That is the precise reason that Article 17 was introduced in the Constitution for what? To abolish untouchability. Then should the state have actually indulged all those people who opposed this particular issue and kept its hands holding with respect to abolition of untouchability? When Article 25(2)(b) was introduced with respect to the entry of former untouchables into temples, the state has taken a particular decision, and that was a Hindu-specific intervention, that was a community-specific intervention. Did secularism come in the way of this kind of intervention because it's a Hindu community? No, it did not. So if the Constitution has shown the way that the Indian state reserves the power, constitutionally speaking, to interfere with a single community, provided there are legitimate grounds to do so, why should we resort to uniform civil code to interfere with Muslim exceptionalism on these specific areas? Let's have a discussion on this. So now uniform civil code is no more the discussion. Let me see what their position is on Muslim exceptionalism.
Anand, you want to say something? Yes. Sai, Anand did not answer that question. The conflict between modernity and the tradition. And what can be the way forward?
See, first of all, on the three specific issues that I spelled out, this much is clear that someone has said that they're okay with their daughters getting 1/3 the share of the succession. On child marriage, we are being told that the bulk of the Muslim community is opposing it, in which case it should not have a problem with that being brought by way of a law through codification. So that admission must be taken. Now, with respect to this conflict between modernity and tradition, tradition certainly has its space, and I certainly stand by that particular position. However, the state equally has a call to take. It has the right to take the decision with respect to which of these practices can or cannot survive in the current day and age. That right remains with the state. Most importantly, what is the realm in which the state wants to operate here? Is it saying that we will change the way you read the kalma? Is it saying that notwithstanding the fact there is a law with respect to decibel levels and the number of times you can actually shout on the rooftops, nobody is following it, right? The state is only asking for intervention with respect to three sensitive areas: gender justice, pedophilia, that's what I would call it, and three is with respect to succession. If the state does not have the right to take a decision with respect to pedophilia, which is being justified in the name of a particular document, what is it that the state is useful for? And what would you call such a state? I would call such a state a soft state, because it constantly buckles and bends the moment somebody comes out on the street. So as much as I hold certain groups for holding back their own communities, with or without the consent of the community, let the community have the discussion on that. But the state is also buckling under pressure. Unfortunately, on this particular issue, I would have to agree with someone who I thought I would never agree with, which is Mr. Rahmani, which is that this discussion must certainly happen in the parliament. But this much is clear, that even in the so-called elite group, they are trying to look for justifications and context to protect child marriage. We've just seen that. And we are also looking at justifications with respect to why women must be treated not at par with men on the issue of succession. If this is what is to be expected from this elite panel, what discussion are we supposed to be having with the larger masses from that particular community? Discuss.
So let it be something that can be debated, discussed. Let the whole draft come about. Let the stakeholders be asked, and then we will see what needs to be done.
I would see that as a veiled threat being issued to the Indian government, that if you come out to the UCC, we'll come out to this on the streets like the farm laws. Second, all I would say is, I am grateful to Arth for giving me an opportunity to see Shehzad ji, Taslim ji, and Saira ji fight amongst themselves. Thank you.